Hi guys, welcome back, or if it's your first time here, then thank you for joining us. This is the Doula's Guide to ... with me, Meg, also known as the Dungaree Doula. It's the podcast where we talk about all things pregnancy, birth and parenting. My aim is to share unbiased information alongside a bit of friendly chit-chat to ensure that you head into parenthood feeling confident and excited for what's to come. If you're new to the podcast and would like to know more about me, then go and check out the very first episode for a little introduction and a big chat on hypnobirthing, and then the following episodes for some great birth and parenting preparation. If you love the podcast, you can now leave me a little tip to say thank you via Buy Me a Coffee. The link is in the show notes. A huge thank you in advance if you choose to do this. Before we begin, I also want to remind you that I now have a pre-recorded online course, which is a full antenatal and hypnobirthing course that you can sign up to and work through in your own time. There are over 30 different modules to work through, each made up of video content with PDF downloads, hypnobirthing MP3 tracks, relaxation tracks, journaling prompts, birth plan templates, birth partner checklists, and so much more. It's only £37, which is an absolute steal, but to celebrate the launch of Season 2, you can use the code podcast for 20% off, which makes it just £29. Just click the link in the show notes or head to my website, which is thedungareedoula.co.uk, and head to the online course page. In this episode, I chat with Joy, who is a fellow birth worker at Birth to Beyond. Link in the show notes as always. We're chatting about her incredible bunch of births. So Joy has had not one, but 2 home births after 2 cesareans. In this episode, she chats about her incredible and, in her words, redemptive second home birth, how she prepared for it, and she talks about how birth is like a marathon. As someone who has actually ran a marathon, I myself cannot comment on this. She also talks about tuning into her instincts, and we talk about the importance of movement during pregnancy and beyond. And we also talk about radical acceptance in pregnancy, birth and parenthood and how powerful this is. It was absolutely wonderful, and her story gave me goosebumps many a time, so I hope you love listening as much as I love chatting. Enjoy! Right, we're going. So, hello and thank you for joining me on the podcast. Would you like to introduce yourself first?
Yeah, hi Meg. Oh, I'm so happy to be here. I love talking about birth stories, and usually it's other people's, so to talk about my own for a change is really nice. It feels self-indulgent, actually.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? As like doulas and birth workers, it feels almost like we never get to tell ours.
Yeah, definitely. So it's really nice. So yeah, I'm Joy, and I am a birth worker. I'm now a doula. I'm a mum to 4. And I'm also a running coach, and I am chair of Central Cheshire Maternity Voices Partnership. But that's sort of a new thing. 3-4 years ago, I was an engineer. So, I very much swung round and am fully cemented into the birth world now.
That's amazing. It's so funny, isn't it? Like the range of backgrounds, because most people don't immediately go into birth work. It generally is they've had some sort of career before, and I love hearing what other people have done before.
Yeah, and it's interesting because usually it's either they've had an incredible birth experience or a really dreadful one that really shapes them into being like, I need to work with other women and people and help them. So
yeah, it's nowhere in the middle. It's either like incredible or horrendous. I never want anyone to experience this, or everyone needs to experience this.
Absolutely, yeah, I totally agree.
So today we're going to talk about your 4th birth, but did you want to give like a little bit of background to your first 3, how you got to the point of the 4th one that we're going to talk about?
Yeah, so my first birth, I was pretty young. I was back in New Zealand, which is where I grew up, and I was only 18. So, I don't think the age had a huge impact on it, but it definitely contributed to me going into it perhaps even more blind than I would have 10 years down the line. So I had the pregnancy, it went fine, there were no complications. In New Zealand, you have continuity of care, so you get assigned a midwife, and that's your midwife. So that was nice. Yeah. She was really cool. But yeah, the pregnancy, I went into spontaneous labour at 39 weeks, and then it ended up being a hospital birth, and it was textbook intervention birth. So on my back on a bed, I had 5 people from like my partner's family in there with me because I thought that was normal.
That's a lot of people.
They asked to come and I was like, okay, great. Again, the things I now know, it's just me. It's really like not rocket science why this birth ended up how it did. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't anything insane. I ended up on my back. I was in a lot of distress. I had an epidural and baby didn't like that. We had some decels, bit of fetal distress, and then went to cesarean, in labour cesarean section. And it definitely at the time felt very traumatic, and it felt like very much an emergency. I really struggled with breastfeeding after that, but again, didn't seek any support. I just thought I was bad at that. And then a couple of years later, I got pregnant again, and interestingly I don't know, because I'd done no research, I was very adamant that I was going to have a VBAC, so vaginal birth after cesarean. So I knew that I wanted that, but I changed absolutely nothing in my approach. Just thinking like, oh, it was a fluke the first time, I'm sure it'll work this time. And in between this is when I moved to the UK. And so I moved when I was 30 weeks pregnant, which I don't recommend.
Wow. That's a long distance move as well, right? It's not like an hour down the road.
It was a bit of like a hop, skip and a jump. And it was interesting because my first experience in the UK was with maternity services. So I essentially got off the plane at 30 weeks and walked straight into a booking appointment. And completely different model of care here as well. So that continuity of care was not the demonstrated model. I was confused because I went in and met with someone and then 2 days later it was someone else. And I was like, oh God, who's going to be there when I have my baby?
Yeah, no idea.
Oh, no, yeah. So it was all a bit weird, and it was definitely like terrifying. And interestingly, I went, and I'm air quotations, very overdue, with this baby. I was 42 plus 6, and still absolutely no signs of labour. And hats off to me, I declined all the sweeps and all the bits and bobs being thrown at me. So I'd done a little bit of reading, but yeah, just this baby did not want to come out. But there'd been a massive move.
Yeah.
And, I also had no family around me to support me. So it's not exactly the most safe feeling in the world. No. So, yeah. But same sort of experience. I went to hospital and got sent back quite a few times being told I wasn't in labour. Just not conducive with making me feel good. And then, yeah, that birth in particular was pretty dreadful. I was declined, things like pain relief, and I declined the cesarean when it was put to me because they said that my baby was in distress, and they threatened social services, and I ended up signing on the dotted line for the cesarean section. And I really struggled with that, but that was really pivotal for me, and I'm really grateful I had that experience because it's really shaped me and into what I do now. Yeah. Because I saw how wrong it can go, and and without that experience I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. After that we decided that we wanted to have another child, but it was interesting because this time we were like, well, actually plan it. Yeah. and it took ages, just how life works sometimes, isn't it? And I learned how getting pregnant isn't just something that's really straightforward. I was really lucky the first 2 times. So yeah, almost 2 years of actively trying to conceive, and it was really stressful. And then we booked in the appointment to get some assistance, and then the next day I found out I was pregnant.
Oh yeah, I've heard that from quite a few people.
yeah, it's like as soon as you release and let go of it, or because by booking that appointment, it took so much of that responsibility away from me. Mm-hmm. And it's just interesting. Yeah, I've heard that from a lot of people too. And this pregnancy was so different. I really fiercely knew that I needed to change my approach. I pulled all of my notes. So I got all my notes from New Zealand hospital and the one from the hospital in England. I just started going through them, and it's incredible. There was 155 pages of notes for these 2 births.
Wow.
And I don't know if you've ever read doctor's notes, you probably have, and they're impossible to read.
Yeah.
It took me a long time to decipher what was going on, but I found some sort of common themes, and the notes saying that the patient or myself was being obstructive because I kept asking to get off the bed in my first cesarean birth, and I kept asking to get off the bed, and it said the patient's been obstructive and she's not listening. We've told her she needs to get back onto the bed. And then in the second one, the same thing. It said that I mentioned that I wanted to move and that I was really uncomfortable being on my back, but that they couldn't get access to put the clip on if I was in any other position. And so I just saw these themes of being like, these births were really sedentary. I was unable to move. And after both cesareans, I was told that I had CPD, which is, essentially your pelvis is too small. So these babies wouldn't have been able to come out. 3 different doctors said the same thing to me. And I believed it, right? Of course you do.
Yeah. Why would you not? Why would they lie? And then also I think sometimes, because I've heard that from people before who've had cesareans and then being like, oh, but it's okay. And I think sometimes it becomes a thing to cling on to. Like, oh, it was the right thing.
Yeah, and I definitely think it can really validate that experience. At least in the short term, it potentially is even helpful. Long term, it left a lot of question marks about why my body was unable to do what it was, built to do. Yeah. CPD is incredibly rare, and it's, as you and I both know, it's incredibly overdiagnosed. Yeah. You can't diagnose it by just operating on someone.
No.
It's not that straightforward. So, yeah, with knowing that, I did a little bit more research, and that's when I started looking into biomechanics in birth and hiring a doula, and what did I need to do to be able to have the birth that I knew I wanted to have. And I think for me, I was really lucky because I never had that belief that I couldn't do it. After I had that first cesarean, I knew I wanted the VBAC. And then after the second cesarean, even more so, I knew I could do it. Mm-hmm. So I just had that innate knowing that it wasn't me that had done something wrong here. And just reading those notes reaffirmed it, yeah. So I hired a doula, and I hired a doula because I needed someone on my side, is what it felt like at the time.
Yeah.
And I just wanted someone to be singing from the same hymn sheet, really, because all of my appointments, my antenatal appointments, were really difficult. Even after having 2 cesareans, even if you birth in a hospital, most consultants are not keen. It flies up this high risk red flag that it is, which is misinformed, but it's very much still the norm in most hospitals. So I hired a doula, Jade Lawrence. She was amazing. She was local to me, and from the first phone call, it was someone also telling me what I already knew, which was you can do it. So I told my fiancé at the time that I definitely wanted the VBAC, but I hadn't broken the news to him that I also wanted a home birth.
Take it one step at a time.
Yeah. But the more and more I was talking with my doula, the more and more I realised that for me, the risk was stemming from the intervention of being in the hospital.
Yeah.
And there's a risk in whatever we do, but there's also, there's a risk in staying at home, or there's a risk in unassisted birth, but there's also a risk in going into hospital. And whatever choice you make, whatever's right for you is different for everyone. But for me, I knew that going to hospital would lead to another cesarean. So I went down the home birth route, and it was really difficult because I did engage with the home birth team under our local trust. They were really supportive, but finding a consultant that was on board was really tough. And I knew I didn't need them to be on board, but it was nice to have. Yeah. And at this point, I hadn't had a baby vaginally, so I did want someone to to guide me if I needed that guidance. Thankfully, towards 38 weeks, I did change consultants. I said I was sick of the person I'd had before. And I found an amazing lady at our local trust I walked in, told her I was having a home birth, and she was like, great. okay, I'll see you when you've had your baby. And that was brilliant. You know, she knew I was informed, and she knew that, like, yeah, it's just birth, man. Didn't overcomplicate it.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that was sort of one of the things I changed. And I introduced movement, not just into labour, but into the pregnancy.
Yeah.
I'd been really sedentary through my first two, and I knew that if my baby's getting stuck, which was the reasons for these cesareans, so they were both back-to-back babies, which at the time was pathologized. I was told that was a bad thing, but I was like, if it's a positional thing, then I need to try and do whatever I can to create some more space.
Yeah.
And I didn't really know what I was doing, but I was just intuitive with it. I just, I did all the spin baby stuff, my daily forward-leaning inversions, and that was all supported by my doula. She was great with optimal positioning. And I walked a lot. I started spinning. I was on the spin bike every day up until 39 weeks. And I did a bit of running and stuff. And I felt way better. And my pregnancy was just so easy. Like, I had terrible pelvic girdle pain with my last two. I was almost on crutches towards the end of those pregnancies, and just none of that. So the movement really helped just generally. And also just with mental health, it was amazing. And then at 39 weeks, my waters broke, which was crazy because that had not happened with the last two. And I chose not to tell the midwives because I knew I'd be put in a clock. So I just kept an eye on myself, by myself. And then about 24 hours later, contractions started. And it was textbook. We went for a walk whilst my contractions were 3 or 4 minutes apart because they'd been like that for a while, and I knew that they'd been like that for a while, and I knew I wanted to get things moving a bit. So we went out for a walk. It was beautiful. We came back from that walk, and I was on my hands and knees transitioning. And yeah, my doula came, the home birth midwife came, and my baby was born in the pool 2 hours later. And so that was amazing. And it was really straightforward. It wasn't the redemptive birth for me because there was still quite a lot of intervention after she was born. And I again, knowing what I know now, I would have changed how I'd approached it. So she was born and she was a bit shocked because I think she did get a little bit wedged on her way out. I was on my back in the birthing pool. And I changed positions and she was born, but I never thought there was anything wrong with her. My intuition told me she was perfect, but everyone else was just panicking because, as we know, babies take some time to transition into the world. But my home birth midwife was really freaked out, and she took the baby and cut the cord early to resus. She was crying before she even got to the resus bay. So that's really the only thing that dampened the experience for me retrospectively, because then I learned. I always said, why was it that everyone else in that room was so worried and I wasn't? And it sounds so silly now, but I finally realised, it's because there wasn't anything wrong, because the only person in that room who knows if there's something wrong is the mother or birthing person who's got that biological connection, right?
Yeah, 100%. But it's so hard in that moment to, especially I imagine in that bed when you finally got that birth that you had been dreaming of, to then at that point be like, yeah, everything's fine, and then someone grabs your baby, like you can't speak up almost at that moment. That's when it's so hard to be able to say something, because you're not using that part of your brain, are you? Like, we know that you're not. It's even especially at the moment of birth, you're just, all you're focused on is your baby. So for someone to then try and do something, you can't just go, hang on, wait a minute. I mean, some people can, but it's incredibly difficult.
Yeah, and again, because we're constantly getting these different narratives into us that make us question that instinctive voice, you don't know what's what. And I think it takes a long time to be able to unravel sort of what we've been conditioned to believe to get back to that. And me and my partner, we joke so much about it because we've just gotten better at birth the more kids we have. And because we've just undone so much of what we think we need and gone back to what we actually just just back to basics. I'm really like lucky that I can look back on the birth experience and learn something from that, because of the work I do. But my fourth baby, we were like, I really wanted the last child, and my other half was not so convinced. But we had a 7-month-old, so that's kind of why he was not convinced, right? But I think I had this feedback, and all of a sudden my whole life changed. My confidence, how my mental health, everything. Breastfeeding was not easy, but it was, we did it. I knew I'd already done the work for the birth, and the birth happened, so I knew if I put the work in, the breastfeeding would happen. Even though I thought I trusted my body, it wasn't until after having that birth that really that deep connection and trust returned. And so everything just got easier, and I was like a powerhouse. It's amazing. And that's when I started seeing this correlation between how we birth and how it shapes us as people, like postpartum. So I wanted another kid straight away. I was like, let's have another one. It was so fun. Even though the first words that came out of my mouth after I birthed her were never again. Very intense. It was very intense. Luckily my partner just sort of semi-jumped on board, and we fell pregnant in one cycle. I was breastfeeding, so like walking, talking example of why that does not
hold up.
At this time I did the same thing. So I didn't hire a doula this time, interestingly. That's interesting because I thought that that had served its purpose, which was to get me the birth that I needed. And I didn't realise at the time what other roles that they can encompass. So that was interesting. But even so, I was, by this point, I may as well have been a qualified obstetrician. So I didn't need any information. But I really lent into just trusting and just going with the flow. I ran every single day, all the way through my pregnancy. And it was just, it was easy, and I knew that I would home birth again. Interestingly, even though I'd already had a home birth, the hospital still didn't want me to have one.
Really? I mean, I think really, that's not actually that surprising, is it, when you've worked with people giving birth, but it is still quite shocking to hear.
It's ridiculous. Like, I actually, laughed because I went in. So I sort of went to these appointments to humour them, because more out of an interest to see how to navigate it. And I think everyone's different. I totally understand why people choose not to go to these appointments. But knowing what I knew and knowing how they can affect you, I sort of felt okay to do that. And it was wild, So to say I'm having a home birth, and they were like, oh, you've had 2 cesareans, so it's really dangerous. It's some of the stuff that they come out with when it comes down to 2 cesareans as opposed to 1 with the risks is just absolutely insane. And I had all of this, statistics memorized off the top of my head, all the NICE guidelines, all this stuff that I'd had for years in my head. And so I asked them, can you give me the information? And they were just absolutely gobsmacked when I told them that actually they're completely wrong, and here's the evidence, and cited the paragraph and line of, which you shouldn't have to do, by the way.
It's not your job, it's their job.
Exactly. And I reminded them of that, but they never ever noticed the fact that I'd had that vaginal birth at home. That didn't matter. It was just, you've had those 2 cesareans, so you'll forever have that stamp on your head of you're high risk. And but that was fine. I said, I'm doing what I'm doing, so I'm just coming here in case if something changes and I feel like I want some support, then that's great. Swapped consultants again to the lovely lady. She was like, yeah, cool, see you later. And why are you here? Actually, with her words, why are you here? You don't need to see a consultant.
That's amazing. You don't hear that very often.
Brilliant, so brilliant. And those are the obstetricians that are really, gold standard.
Yeah,
right?
100%.
So we still had the home birth team with us, which was cool. But this time, I really sort of knew that I didn't want any help at all. But it was amazing. I ran, like I said, up until the day that I had her, and so I felt really good. And it was again 39 weeks, and I started getting surges. I had a really long latent labour, but I've had really long latent labours with all of mine, and it's because I believe of their position being back to back, slightly drawing it out. But I knew that that was cool. I knew that my baby needed a little bit of extra time to rotate. So I really loved those overnight surges and contractions I was getting, because I knew that they were doing their job.
Yeah.
And that all I needed to do was support them. So like optimize them doing their job.
Yeah.
So just making sure I was lying in, a good position to keep my pelvis open. I approached birth like I do my marathons, because I think they're really similar. They're both endurance events.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I've never run a marathon. I shouldn't really comment on that, but it's what I imagine really it's like.
And if you give birth, you can run 100, right? So I fueled myself constantly. I was really kept up with my hydration, my food, even when I didn't want to because I felt sick. I knew it was so important. And I just approached it like I would approach anything like that, like a sporting event. And methodical with my movement. Every morning I would get up and go for the walk, and then I would come home and have productive rest, make sure I was resting. I would do my hypnobirthing stuff and really connect with my baby and back to myself. And then I would get up and do some more movement, do another forward-leaning inversion. And then on night, I think it was 5 nights of that. And I felt good because, I was up all night with these sort of contractions, but I really was just allowing it and knowing that it was okay, as opposed to resisting it and being like, oh my God, why is this not happening still? And I knew it was normal for me, so it was cool. And on the 5th night, things they started. I knew it would happen at night because I knew that my melatonin would support it sort of ramping up. And that day in particular, I'd had like a show, and it started like a little bit of bleeding and stuff, which again, it was quite a lot of blood, but I knew it was fine. My gut was like, yeah, it's cool, so I didn't tell anyone about that. I'm not stressed. I don't need midwives to be stressed.
No.
And I was like, I think baby's going to come tonight. And the NHS had dated me, like, for my scans to be due on, like, the 28th or something. But I'd always known that she would be born on the 20th. I had the 20th in my head and was like, okay, so it was the 19th at this point, and I said, okay, she's going to come tomorrow. So we didn't know it was a she, actually. But I did, actually, but we didn't know. So I put the babies to bed, and I knew as soon as I put them to bed that things would start doing their thing. And put them to bed, the lights went off, they started sleeping, and then all of a sudden things started really like getting intense. I was so excited because I just know that intensity is what you need. And just by reframing that, I was just like, come on, waiting for you to get stronger and more powerful, because I knew that that's what I needed to be able to get to my baby, right? So I really, really focused on relaxing into them. And again, the uterus is a huge muscle. I do not tense up whilst I'm going on runs. It really doesn't help the case. And the same sort of thing, just relaxing. I spent a couple of hours dancing. I found moving through it really helpful. Did a lot of dancing, and I had my comb, which I thought was awesome. And they sort of slowly got closer and closer together. And then at about 10, 11 p.m. decided like, oh, my other half needs to get some sleep. And so sent him to bed, and I decided to try and go to bed myself. And 11 p.m. I realised I was just too uncomfortable. I'd been sort of labouring on all fours on the bed, so I decided to get up and go into the shower. And I was realising at this point that I would like things to speed up. I was getting a bit tired, and I decided, right, I'll try and change positions and do some work to see if we can help this baby. And so I sat on the toilet dilation station backwards. And I put a pillow over the system. And And I sort of lay there. As soon as I sat on that toilet, it was like unbearable.
Yeah.
So intense. I was like, oh no, oh hell no, I don't like this.
I had similar in my bed. Like I just went for a wee. I wasn't even going there to just sit on it. I literally went for a wee and started crying because it really hurt. And I was like, no. Started crying and immediately got up and then was fine again. But it was horrible.
It is so intense. And you know, when we look at like how your pelvis opens when you do sit on a toilet, like, and how your pelvic floor relaxes, like of course, like everything is opening.
Yeah.
That baby is in an optimal position to start moving down. But it was very alarming.
Yeah.
And so I moved off the toilet and then into the shower where I had the water on my back and I was sort of leaning against the side. And I used that to sort of bring me back down from that tense state that I was in on that toilet. But then I knew I had to get back on the toilet. And that's kind of that surrendering that is really tricky. And that's why I compare it to running, because you have to, it's when you acknowledge that you have to go through that really difficult part to get out the other side. You know, if you keep holding back from it, you're not going to get there. Or you will, but it'll just take longer.
Yeah. 100%.
And it takes a lot of courage, I think. It's really scary. But I knew that I had to get back on the toilet and to sort of allow that sensation. And, you know, so I did that for about an hour and a half. I went back and forth onto the toilet. As soon as I felt that panic or that stress, I would then move back into the shower and reconnect with myself and back and forth. And time passed really quick like that, and it was amazing. And I did it all by myself, and it was quite like a sacred sort of, I remember it really clearly. And then I went back to bed for a little bit and started thinking, like, I started having these doubts coming into my mind, being like, man, this is really intense, eh? Like, it's like, maybe I can't do this. Like, it's so funny because, like, I know what I know and I knew what I knew, but I still was like, nah, I don't like this anymore. Like, I don't think this is cool. So I was like, I'm going to get the midwife out to come and check me. And on all my birth preferences, it's always been no vaginal exams. For me, I knew it was not going to help me.
Yeah.
And all it's going to do is either put me on a clock or introduce infection or whatever else. But I just really needed someone to tell me, like, because I'm doing all this work, I'm on the toilet, off the toilet. I'm like, am I anywhere, is anything happening? Should I try it and prioritize sleeping right now? Or should I continue with the movement? I don't want to wear myself out to the point where I have another, 3 days to go. So the midwife came, and she's amazing. They're so cool. Luckily, I had a really good relationship with them. And so she's like, are you sure? She's like, I don't think we need to do that. And I was like, I said, I know that you doing an exam is not going to help me at all, and it could derail me. And I'm still asking you to do that, please. Yeah. And so she was cool. So yeah, she checked me, and I was 3 centimeters with bulging waters. So it didn't really tell me anything. Yeah. Like, what do you do with that information?
Yeah.
And in fact, if anything, I feel like there is this perception that if you're below like 5 or 6, then you're not really in labour. And even as a birth worker, I know that that's absolute bullshit. Yeah. But it's still a narrative that's long, like, you know, ingrained in your head. So if anything, it told me, okay, you're probably not that close. So great. Well done, Joy. Awesome. Like, good decision. So she left, that was about 3:30 in the morning. She left, and I decided to go back to bed because that told me that I was not close. Got into bed, and I just started freaking out, and I was like, I want to go to hospital. I want to go to the hospital. I don't want to do this. Every contraction was just crippling me. And so I said to my partner, I said, it's time. I need to go to hospital. I don't want home birth anymore. And he was like, okay. It was amazing. He was like, okay, yeah, I'm going to call the midwife. I'll call the hospital. You're doing amazing, or whatever. And he shut the door. He said, I'll be back in a second. And he called the midwife, and he said, look, she's transitioning. You need to come.
Oh, that is amazing.
yeah, she's like, the baby's going to be here soon. And that was what he told me afterwards, and the midwife told me afterwards, it just like proves how much he was really listening, through that journey and observing, and how much he trusted it as well. So from the guy that was like weird, like so scared about having a home birth to, yeah, he was awesome. And so the midwife turned up not long after, and I had moved back into the shower at this point. And by the time she got there, I was making these noises at the end of these contractions, like oh.
Yeah.
And I looked at her and she looked at me and I said, I think I've just transitioned. I was like, because now I'm not scared.
Yeah.
I was like, I can't believe that even with knowing what I'm knowing, whilst I was in that, I still like couldn't just observe it. It's so interesting.
You can't rationalize it. It's insane. Even like when I had my second, I was already I'd already trained to be a doula and a hypnobirthing teacher, and even in that transition bit, I had no idea I was in it. Like, no idea I was in it. And then afterwards I was like, oh, of course I was in it. So obvious.
It's wild, but it's so helpful, isn't it, when you're preparing people to birth, when you explain that no matter how much we prepare for this, there is going to be a moment where you're going to not think you can do it, no matter how much we tell you that that's normal. And the same thing actually with pushing, because before I'd had a vaginal birth, people said like, you'll feel like you need to poo.
Yeah.
And when it happened, I was like trying to get out of this birth pool, like my life depended on it, and my midwife was like, no, it's okay. Like I was like, I really need a poo, and she's like, okay. She was really good, to be fair, because she knew that I did not need a poo.
Yeah.
But she was like fully prepared to like support me in getting out, because I was really freaked out. I was like, oh my god, I really need a poo. And it's just crazy because, again, I had so much preparation. Everyone told me it would feel like that. But until you've felt it, it's wild, man. Yeah,
you need someone else to be able to spot it. That's why, like, your birth partner, but your partner then did amazing, because oftentimes, like, you tell partners and you're like, are they even taking this in? Like, it's really serious. You need to be the one who can notice what's happening. Otherwise, they're just... As so many other people in that situation would have rang that midwife and been like, we're going to the hospital. So many other people.
It's really important, and when I talk to a lot of my clients, I went talking to the birth partners, saying like, if you don't sit into anything, what I need you to sit into is when we're talking about transition, because it is pivotal for you to be able to gently guide through that, and understand that there is a difference between transition and a mum having like an innate knowing that something is wrong. And that takes time to be able to like learn your partner like that as well, I think.
100%.
It's a massive responsibility, and I wouldn't have been able to do it without him. So amazing. I was in the shower at this point, and my midwife kindly brought some gas and air upstairs for me on my request, and then she was observing me from afar. She didn't even talk at all. She was awesome. She at one point, she just, in between a contraction, she said, do you want to have the baby in the shower? That's fine. If you want to have the baby in the shower, we can stay here if you feel safe. That's great. And I sort of looked at her and I knew that I needed to get out of the shower. I was like, I don't want to have the baby in the shower. So I was like, okay, and then I had this moment of clarity where I needed to put a bra on. It was so weird. It's the weirdest thing. You can be in this most intense zone, and then you come up out of it, and so I went and put a bra on. I don't know why, weird, and then walked downstairs, where we had the birth pool set up. It was beautiful, and we had a sofa there, and I remember not really knowing what was going on, and then all of a sudden realised I was in like a lunge position, and it was like weird. I don't know why I'm in this position. Just put one of my legs up on the sofa, and then there was like this big pop and my waters went. So obviously I was clearly opening my pelvis on that side. I suspect Bubby's back was rotating down that way, and hopped into the pool, and it really wasn't very long before I started feeling a lot of stinging. And we've got it all on camera. My mum zoomed in from New Zealand.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, like I really wanted her to be there for the birth, but it didn't work out that way. So she jumped on Zoom. My partner set all of that up whilst I was in the pool, which was amazing. And then she was on Zoom. Like again, I clearly like don't mind being observed to that extent. And yeah, I remember saying like it stings, and I just remember hearing my mum's voice saying, "That's great, that's a good sign, they're so close." And then I just remember the feeling of really wanting to get her over and done with, which is the same feeling I had with my first. I've never been one of these that can control my breathing at that point, and I teach everyone to, but I just just get out. So in one push she came out, and just the most amazing feeling in the world. So slippery and amazing. It's so cool. I think just for that feeling I would do it 100 times over.
Yeah,
but
magic.
It's incredible. So amazing. And she came up in between my legs. She had a nuchal cord, so her cord was wrapped around her neck, and I could feel the midwives twitching.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can hear on the video they're like, "Oh, she's got a cord, you just need to pull it." And I was like, "Yeah, I've got it." Yeah. And I just slowly lifted the cord around her neck, and I just I'd moved. It's interesting, if you watch the video, I instinctively moved into the centre of the pool, like away from people, and was creating this space, because I was like, no one is taking my baby. And she was really quiet again, and I just kept her under the water, and brought her up to my chest finally. And we didn't know what the sex was, and so I had my partner, who was very, very excited. You can hear him hyperventilating in the background. And then he starts asking, like, what is it? What have we got? And I was still in my birth pause.
Yeah.
And so you can see me again move away from him. Like I was so like, I had my arms around her, and I was just not letting anyone into my space, including him, the poor thing. He was really excited. And I was like, in the video you just hear me going, "Just give me a second." Like seriously, like come on guys.
Yeah.
Like, just a moment.
I've just brought life into the world. Like, hold on.
Hold on a tap. And it came around today. It just took a lot. It must have been the longest, like, few minutes of his life waiting to hear what we had. But I eventually told him that it was another girl, and I was so happy. And my mum announced the time, so I heard her say, "Oh, it's 5 minutes past 5, Joy." So that was really nice, because no one actually recorded the time. I so quietly birthed her that the midwives weren't aware that she'd been born. And then she was so born at 5 minutes past 5 on the first day of spring on the 20th of March.
Like you knew.
I knew she would be born then. And then the midwives kept their distance, which was awesome. And then my placenta just came on out after, it wasn't very long. And I popped that in a bucket, and I said, "Oh, by the way, placenta's here." And again, the midwives were like, "Ah." Like, it's no big deal. Like, it's cool.
Like, they don't see it every day.
Yeah. Well, they were just like really alarmed that I'd birthed the placenta and not announced it.
Yeah.
It was like, but that was, I mean, I've just birthed a baby. The placenta is really a non.
Yeah. Just slides out after.
It's weird. And then it was really, really cool. We had a really good like golden hour and stuff. We got out of the pool, and it was interesting. So everything was like, there was no intervention. But then I did have an issue with my bleeding. My gut told me that it was okay, but it was a few hours it just wasn't slowing down. And my midwives were amazing. They really just kept asking me what I wanted to do, and we did lots of palpation of my tummy to try and help it, which was not very comfortable. And then after a few hours, I did my gut felt like, yeah, I'm not feeling amazing anymore. I do think that this is possibly a little bit too much. I think they'd said by that point they'd estimated it was over a litre. Yeah. And so I was like, I'll have the injection and see if that helps as like a stepping stone to having to transfer, which I was like, no way, man.
No.
So I opted to do that, and sorted it out. Fine. So I'm grateful for that. I don't regret that, because that was the right decision for me at the time, and I'm grateful to be lucky enough to have a midwife who understood that it was my choice, and wasn't telling me that I needed to go to hospital. So it was really, really good. I had another tear again, and that is, I know, because I pushed my babies out really quickly. But also, I don't pathologize tearing anymore. I know that we're designed to tear. Some of us do, some of us don't.
Yeah.
And it's all good. I healed beautifully and was running 3 weeks later, and it was amazing. So my reflection on it, it's interesting. My reflection on it is that if we were to have another, which we are not, we would have an unassisted birth.
Yeah.
But that's just because I know I don't need it. And I was still, in that moment she was born, I was still navigating them, still trying to keep my space. And so it just, for me, it's just an added, don't need that. So yeah. But it was amazing. And the only thing I really changed, like I said, is the movement, both in the pregnancy and labour, and just my approach. So just making sure that I was informed. And sometimes being informed is just deciding to disconnect from the services, and sometimes being informed is not doing that, and that's cool. But I do believe that we are built to birth, and I do believe that we live in a sedentary, like modern society, where even when we try to exercise, we're doing that for an hour a day or half an hour a day. And hundreds of years ago we were on all fours all the time and running around, and so it is no wonder that we do have to be a bit intentional sometimes with how we approach it. But I do think that if we can understand that, we can then sort of almost reapply the instinctive movement back into it. I think it's pivotal. So
yeah, I 100% agree with that. I've been seeing a few things recently on Instagram, more from doulas in America, saying things like that you don't need to do spinning babies, you don't need to do intentional movement, babies know how to get into the right position for them. And I obviously agree with that. I do think babies do know how to get into the right position for them. But yeah, our lifestyle is completely different to even how it was 100 years ago. People will just sit in an office all day, go home, eat their tea, sit on the sofa and watch Netflix. How is that? That's not, your babies end up you just slumped all the time. And it's not blaming people, we don't know this, it's just how society is. But then it's so then it's great if we can be intentional about it. It's going to be helpful, of course it is.
And I think it's really important. Yeah, I think it's really important to know that it's not about blame or stigmatizing lifestyle, because. And it doesn't have to be running marathons. I don't suggest any of my clients to do
no.
That's on another spectrum, right? But it's about functional, joyful movement.
Yeah.
It's about learning to love like moving your body. And babies do know how to get into the best position. They are clever. They are wise. But we have to give them space. Mm-hmm. And I think everyone, when left alone, almost everyone is able to birth their baby, even without that. But this is about optimizing it and making birth a really fun, powerful, efficient experience, because it doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be miserable. You can make it better. So I always say to people, movement and biomechanics in birth, it's an intervention, right?
Yeah.
So as standard, you shouldn't need to do that. And if I even have to use biomechanics in birth, I make it very clear that this is an intervention. Yeah. But it's more about the prep through pregnancy for me.
Yeah.
And if you can do the work and do it then you can fully let go in labour, because you've got the space. And
100%. And people are prepared, well, not everyone, but a lot of people are prepared to do things like hypnobirthing, and they'll implement that into their daily routine. And it's just another thing to implement. You don't have to do it daily if you don't want to, but it's just another thing that you can implement into your routine that is gonna benefit you during your birth. It's also gonna benefit you for your pregnancy. It does, it improves people's mental health, it improves their physical well-being. There's so many benefits to including more movement into pregnancy that, even if you know, maybe your birth would have been fine anyway. You've got nothing to lose from doing it.
Exactly. And I know that it's hard. Like we do live a really busy life. Like most of us, it's like trying to think like, oh my God, how am I going to find time to do that? But it doesn't have to be, again, like structured movement. Like some people, that's what they love. But for other people, it is just about just being mindful of, you know, how you sit and thinking about things like just walking. Walking is so underrated.
Yeah.
You know? And just thinking about like how can you add a little bit more in to your day-to-day life. And I think everyone's different. For me, being prescriptive, I've always worked well with that. So I like to have a structure of, you know, do these things and you'll get a better outcome. But you know, you can be fluid with it too.
Yeah, 100%. And so you said like, so that was your sort of redemptive birth, and that, honestly, that story was just incredible. Like, it gave me goosebumps so many times. It sounds like you did amazing, and it struck me that the movement, but also, do you feel like it was also just that sort of like almost radical responsibility for your birth? Like, it just sounds like you had so much innate trust in your body in this birth, and you just knew.
Yeah, definitely. And in everything, I think that it's just correlates so much with postpartum and my ability to parent as well.
Yeah.
So with having those births, it's without them. I was so unwell, man, like so unwell after those cesareans. Like my mental health was an absolute shit show.
Yeah.
And, you know, I targeted that with everything from holistic to like medicine, whatever. But what actually like sorted me out was those births.
Yeah.
Right? And there's a huge connection between how we birth and how we function as parents beyond and into our postpartum, which is forever.
Yeah.
So yeah, like breastfeeding again. Like I'm still breastfeeding my I don't know how old she is now. She's like 18 or 19 months old. And it was effortless. I say that. So the first breastfeeding journey was really a challenge, as was that birth. I had to work really hard for it.
Yeah.
And then my fourth, like the home birth, the second home birth was effortless, and then the breastfeeding journey was effortless.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's all tied. It's all tied into it itself. Yeah. 100%.
It definitely is all tied into it. And there's lots of research on it as well, isn't there? Like there's lots of research on how you birth and how that does impact your parenthood, and how I was reading something recently how there's research about how people who have had really long stressful inductions then find that they cope with parenting, like it's harder for them, how they deal with their babies, and they report that their babies are more fractious and they cry more and they sleep less and stuff like that. But actually what the research has found is that the babies don't. It's just the way that the mothers perceive it is different to the way that mothers who have had joyful birth experiences perceive their babies, who probably are exactly as fractious and cry and don't sleep, because babies don't sleep.
Absolutely. I met with a client this week who said this. She was like, my baby's been so good. Like, I've just found it like, this baby's amazing. And I said, no, dude. I said, you put so much work in, and you had this birth experience where you were in control, and you know, in fact, it ended in a cesarean, but she was so in control and in her power. And all of her postpartum has reflected that. I said, it's not that your baby is a baby, man. Like I've looked at how often he gets up. It's you know, he doesn't sleep a lot. Your perception of this is that he is a good baby, and that's because you've had this birth experience that has been largely positive for you, and you've really leaned into planning for your postpartum as well, which is important.
Yeah.
So important.
Yeah. 100%. No, thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, it's a really incredible story. And then, so did that? I will let you go in a minute because we've been chatting for so long. But I just wanted to ask: is that what led you to birthwork then, or you hadn't done birthwork before that, or had you?
So yeah, I've been after I had my first daughter, it's when I sort of had that knowing that that's what I was going to do, and I started dabbling in it. It wasn't until after I had Indy that I really took the jump to go out of my full-time work to do it, because that was scary. But yeah, so I've been doing it for a little while now, and yeah, really loving it, but also trying to balance toddlers at home, and it's
chaos.
Yeah, it's really not like easier.
It's not easier. It's a delicate balance.
Yeah. You can relate.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm just, the less said about it, the better at the minute. I'm like, it'll at some point it'll be like an even pain. It'll just balance out where it's like the work and the parenting is just equally easy. But at the minute it's like one bit's easy, the other bit's stressful. Then that bit becomes a bit easier. Yeah. The other bit gets more stressful.
I was always told that, you know, if something's stressful, then balance it by the other bit being good. But it's a season, isn't it? And it's hard to like get that balance right and figure out. You don't want to wish it away because it's amazing.
Exactly, yeah. And I think that kind of like that even ties in with the birth stuff is just acceptance. Like you said, like you had to accept that you had long labours and that bits of it were going to be like this. And I think it's the same with parenting. You have to accept that every season's going to be completely different. And I talk about this on Instagram all the time, is that like I don't believe that motherhood is inherently hard at all, and I don't like that narrative around it. I really don't feel like it is. But I feel like I'm in that place because I accept that there's going to be hard bits, and I'll just let those bits wash over. I'm like, whatever.
Yeah, like you have to, otherwise it is like a slippery slope to not being very, very well.
Yeah, and just hating every minute and being like, what have I done?
I completely agree though. It's so interesting the amount of people who, you know, you get those comments like, oh my gosh, you've got your hands full, and oh, you've had another one. Wow, 4, that's so crazy. And they always look really surprised when I say that I love it.
Yeah, like I chose to have 4 children. Like people act like you didn't choose to do it.
Yeah, and it's just interesting. People are always really gobsmacked by that. And I think that narrative's like, it needs to change, doesn't it? Because it is a bit of a crutch to... You know, it's okay to celebrate it. Like, you almost get made to feel guilty for saying that you enjoy.
Yeah. I'm like, I love it. Yeah, it's stressful, and sometimes I'm like, yeah, I could probably sleep for a week, but I absolutely love it. Like, literally every day. It's like, it shouldn't be like a weird thing to hear that.
Yeah.
But I guess it's because everyone's unsupported, and there's a society in it. It's not like, I understand why people find it hard, but yeah, I do think that acceptance is the like greatest tool for pregnancy, birth, and parenthood.
Yep, and also just being able to ask for support because, like, we need a village. Like, you do need a village, and whether that's like family or if you just create your own village through in other ways, like you've got to have that support. And if for me, like, you know, postpartum doula was great because we didn't have close family, you know. So just however you need to form it. Yeah,
it's going to look different for everybody, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You don't have to have, you know, not everyone's going to have that incredible family of like your mum, all the aunties, the cousins, the sisters. Like, it's unrealistic for the majority of us.
Yeah.
So, thank you. Right, I will let you go now because, we've been chatting for over an hour. But before you do you want to share where people can find you, if you've got anything coming up, how people can work with you, things like that?
Yeah, so I am on Instagram loosely. I need to be on Instagram more actually, but so I birthed to beyond with number 2 for Instagram, and anyone who's interested in like how they can use movement or introduce movement, or especially VBAC or home birth after cesarean parents, that's kind of like my real passion. I'm working with a mum and actually a doula colleague at the moment who's planning her home birth after cesarean for January, which is so exciting. So, but please, anyone that's interested in that sort of stuff, I'm always keen to talk their ears off.
And do you work virtually as well? So like on Zoom and stuff? Yeah, perfect. So I'll put all your links and everything in the show notes so people can go and find you there too.
Well, thanks for having me. I've loved talking about it.
Oh, no, thank you so much for coming on. It's like a genuinely really incredible story, so thank you for sharing.
Thank you.